gone.
Yeah.
Every year something we hear about this. The chance is rather low, but I was mistaken saying that there was an area of Finland. They were working much harder hit than us.
And to kind of see what it comes from, there was there were some new studies and scientists and probabilities increase.
Klara börja. Jag tänker att det här kommer ju spelas in. Så vi har alla möjligheter att dela det sen också. Allt kommer ju spelas in. Så vi kommer ju dela det sen.
Okej.
Så gör en riktigt bra sektion så kommer vi
Okej.
spela det.
Skal vi bare gå i gang så?
Oh, we have a success of the audience.
So, hello and welcome to this session on hydrogen valleys across the regions. My name is 𝗏𝗂𝘀𝘁. I'm a moderator of this session, and I'm from the Nordic Energy Research, which is an institution under the Nordic Council of Ministers. We finance research across the region, but we also facilitate the intergovernmental cooperation in the Nordics and between the Nordics and abroad. So, talking about hydrogen, both in the Nordic and South America with Brazil and other South American countries are frontrunners in renewable energy and clean hydrogen. Both regions invest in hydrogen from renewable sources as a cornerstone for industries and maritime sectors. And then you, of course, might ask why hydrogen valleys. The reason is that hydrogen is not a standalone solution. It's part of a value chain that spans from electricity generation to a range of end-use application, supported by infrastructure, sector integration, and innovation. And advancing hydrogen valleys is critical for enabling the green transition, especially for decarbonizing energy-intensive industries and transportation. We believe that the Nordic region is well positioned to meet this challenge with ambitious energy targets, policy targets, extensive research program, and a history of innovation, and also a very strong cooperation. We have the tools to scale up the new technologies. So with that, I think we should then discuss how to do it and come with some good examples. And for that, I've invited a very distinguished panel here today. If I start from you, we see Helena Salin, who is head of Zero Carbon Future Mission from Business Finland. We have 𝗏𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗲, who is Executive Vice President of Sustainability in SINTEF Norway. And we have 𝗥ø𝗸𝗶𝗏𝗀𝗀𝗲, who is the director at the Maritime, Danish Maritime Authority. Sorry for that. So let's start by setting the scenes. I will ask one of you each a question, and then you can just start by saying a little bit more about yourself, and then we will start. I will also encourage you in the audience, if you want to raise some questions, I will open up in the end if the time's allowed. But Helena, shall we start with you? So, asking to the Finland's national strengths, how is Finland building on its national advances to advance renewable hydrogen and related industries?
Okay, thank you, Klaus, and you can hear me. I hope it sounds that way. So Helena Salin is the name, and briefly a couple of wordings about myself. And firstly, I have to say that probably this energy transition and a clean transition is the segment that is most intriguing and interesting area to work at the moment in the whole world. And I've been around in business around 30 years from invest-in point of view, then also ecosystemic point of view, research point of view, export point of view, and I think we'll need to run with all of our cylinders like that one in order to get this movement going forward. But my personal mission, not talking about business vision, is really to provide hope. I think the clean transition is a hope for younger generation, and I think that our generation has really failed in providing hope for younger generation. And I say this with as a mother of three, and that is my personal mission, that I try to do my best for their future, whatever I can. Okay, but then going to the Finland situation, and I've been often saying that it's a pretty situation so that we have historically all the ingredients there to make this firstly clean transition and also this hydrogen economy to happen. So if we think from our country's point of view, so lots of CO2-free electricity and also a great and pipeline of new renewables. So in the future, we are definitely going to have even more of renewables. And then the question is how we are going to use it. Whether it goes, for instance, to the data centers, whether it goes to the hydrogen economy, and how we do that one. And I would very much like to see that we use the hydrogen economy in order to renew our industries and also to create new industries. Then additionally, we have a very strong grid, and of course we are part of the 𝗏𝗏𝗏 and Nordic grid going further to Central Europe, and also has been strengthened recently with our Aurora line with Sweden. So the grid and flexibility in the whole system is definitely the key. Then we also have large industrial ecosystems and abundance of biogenic CO2 availability in order to build more largely the hydrogen economy. And also the chemical industries is, of course, there. Then what I would like to also say is that we have promised to be the producer of 10% of the European Union's clean hydrogen by 2030. And now, of course, the question is to what we are going to use the hydrogen for. And I would like to see that in addition to probably some export happening, we really utilize it to renew the industries. So really create something value add for Finland, because this is a great opportunity. And the hydrogen valley is definitely, I would say that these kind of regional clusters, we need to have a critical mass and so forth. But now I stop here, but maybe you got the groundings where we stand at the moment.
So then, thank you, Helena. Then the question to you, Niels. I mean, we have heard the perspective, but also the knowledge of and the development of.
Sorry, could you speak up a bit? I'm hard of hearing.
I'll try to speed up. So the knowledge development and all this is quite crucial to get a competitive hydrogen that can actually tender this and also make some hydrogen valleys that is scalable and also upscalable. You're coming from the research background, but also part of the some hydrogen valleys in Norway. Could you please elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yes, we, as you say, we have a center of excellence in Norway called Hydrogeni, which is supported by the government, but also have about 50 industrial partners. And it started about 3 years ago. And in this center, we have focused on how can we deploy the ideas which are generated in this center, which has a budget of about 50 million euros over these 8 years. And then we saw these hydrogen valleys as a possibility to bring out the knowledge we are generating, both through the talent, so the PhD development and the postdocs, but also through the companies to see if we could create a hydrogen valley in mid-Norway. And at that time, there was a big discussion about large-scale transport and export of hydrogen from Norway, blue hydrogen. But that discussion went sour, actually, at some point between Norway and Germany. But we thought, well, why don't we build upon the green possibilities we have in the mid-Norway, use our knowledge, and then to bring forward this as a proposal in the European Clean Hydrogen Partnership. So this, to put it a bit shorter, so this initiative now is called 𝗏𝗏𝗏. It has a budget of about 100 million euros in total. It looks into 5 different value chains. So it includes, as hydrogen valleys need to include both production, transport, storage, and end use. And in the end use, we have end use both in industry to create e-methanol, and then the other usage and the end use is for the maritime use, for service ships, for the seafood farming in Norway. So we're looking at hydrogen and also the possibility for using this for a fast ferry, which is stretching a bit in terms of mid-Norway, but it happens in the northern part of Norway. So I think that was something which also was an attraction for the people in the European Commission and the evaluators, that we're actually connecting research and innovation to deployment, and through the Hydrogen Valleys initiative and the concept, which is a global initiative brought on by Mission Innovation. Well, you know it very well yourself from the Nordic area, but also Europe, which has the most hydrogen valleys in the world.
Okay, thank you. So now you just mentioned the Mission Innovation, but also it should be mentioned that all the Nordic countries are located by the sea. So of course, maritime sector is quite big in the Nordic. Actually, is when you look at the region as total, we have the world's largest maritime fleet as a region. But it also means that it's one of the big off-takers. So Jakob, can you collaborate? What are the potential for using hydrogen there?
Yes, I will give you the perspective of the maritime sector. My name is 𝗥ø𝗸𝗲𝗃, and I'm from the Danish Maritime Authority. You're right, Klaus, that we see shipping as one of the great off-takers for hydrogen. So as you all know, shipping is a hard-to-abate sector. We can come somewhere with electrification and energy efficiency, but if we are to reach net zero shipping by 2050, we need to look at e-fuels. And by generating this demand, we believe that the shipping sector can be the question to kickstart the energy transition, the global energy transition. So that's what we're looking into. We obviously have some national experience, we have regional experience, we have Nordic experience, but what really matters is global regulation. And that's what we are working on. We have not succeeded yet, but our plan is to work very hard with our Nordic colleagues and other EU colleagues to approve the net zero framework later next year.
Okay, thank you very much. So now we start the panel, and we kind of will start with what are the barriers, because I think it's always discussed that we need to have the entire value chain. We need to have this hydrogen valley on place in order to kickstart the deployment of hydrogen. And that means that we also have to ask ourselves, what are the main challenges across the hydrogen value chain, from production and infrastructure to market creation and end use, in order to develop these hydrogen value chains? I don't know who wants to start there. What are the main challenges?
Maybe we'll go with this question, this order, and then we go in the reverse the next round. So colleagues were here mentioning, we have to talk about the whole value chain, definitely about that one. So for instance, in a production, I mean, locally land use, that kind of renewables availability, definitely, and also production costs, what that is in order to make the business to go forward. And then the infrastructure was already, and logistics was discussed briefly by colleagues as well here. So what kind of infrastructure we need, and also safety topics are related very closely to this one. And as an example, there has been a lot of discussion in Finland that definitely we are going to have a regional hydrogen networks, pipelines, but whether they're going to get some kind of pipelines going further, for instance, Central Europe or somewhere else. So and again, it comes to what is the value add and what kind of new businesses we are going to create. But definitely it's about the infrastructure and systems integration as well. And then it was discussed very nicely from this maritime industry point of view, what is the markets and the demands at the moment, and because there needs to be the kind of long-term security for the companies in order to make the investments to production. And so how do we make the demand? And that is also very interesting, that what are going to be the e-fuels in the future. And at least some latest news there were that, for instance, Maersk bought a fleet of methanol ships, which of course indicates something. But like engine manufacturer 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, they have been testing all pretty much e-fuels, because the engines need to run with all fuels. But again, markets decide then in the end which will be the winners. But we have to be ready for different options. And definitely about this demand, it's about the policies and prices and regulations, which also so drive that one. And then also one additional point I would like to this cross-cutting themes, definitely. So what kind of skills we have, workforce, whether we can really drive the change from that perspective, and also public acceptance and such things. So maybe quite a long list as well.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. Niels, if you should just take some key challenges, what would that be?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of discussion about barriers these days on hydrogen. But there are also some enablers we see quite clearly. And I mean, climate has been the main driver, I would say, decarbonizing, because hydrogen is such a sector coupling. I mean, it can go in where you're using natural gas or oil in a lot of instances. But these days, at least in our part of the world, I mean, there is great concern about energy security, and energy independence is a big item in Europe, especially since the import of natural gas will cease to exist at some time from Russia. So, and hydrogen is a fuel which actually can produce from domestic sources. I mean, it can produce from wind or solar or whatever kind of renewables. And it increases the energy security and independence, be it as hydrogen, be it as ammonia, be it as e-fuels. E-fuels, by the way, I have a hiccup on that. I mean, we need to be sure that the e-fuels we use, that they really make sense for the climate, that we are not just sending out fossil CO2 into the atmosphere again. But I think there's the energy independence and the possibility to produce your own fuel is going to be a stronger driver actually for the years to come now than the climate solutions actually in Europe.
Thank you very much. So you have a comment on this, or I have another question? You have a comment?
I wanted to comment on the financing aspects.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So while we stick to some of the barriers and challenges, we all know that we need to scale up the production of e-fuels. And currently it's difficult because there's such a big price difference to conventional fuels. So what can we do? From the EU side, recently come up with a sustainable transport investment plan where you can pool resources. The idea is to pool resources from member states and also among the Nordic countries that can chip in in order to enable access to long-term financing. Because the problem is that the producers of e-fuels they produce for the long term. They have long-term off-taking agreements, whereas the shipping companies are not used to these agreements. So we need a mechanism to deal with this dilemma. And here, a new financing mechanism is definitely key, both in the Nordic countries but also in the EU.
Okay, thank you. Niels, back to you. Now we talk about a lot about this. That you said that there was the region with the highest number of hydrogen valleys in the world, the Nordic. How can we learn from this existing regional initiative, also for the European hydrogen backbone or in the Nordic cooperation, to strengthen cross-border integration and knowledge sharing?
So in these European hydrogen valleys, where there is funding from the Commission, there is also always the requirement to have connection to other hydrogen valleys. For instance, there's a hydrogen valley in Iceland, there are hydrogen valleys in the Netherlands, there is in Spain, France, and so forth, and go on. So I think it's really important that we try to replicate those who are successful into cooperation, and that we can bring a hydrogen valley from hydrogen valleys to the hydrogen economy. That's really what we want to do, to make the whole thing the hydrogen economy. And I think it's a good way to start with the concept of valleys, although these regions can be quite large, and ultimately we want them to be the whole of Europe. But not only Europe. I mean, there are great activities in South America and in hydrogen because of the vast resources on renewables, and also to see if there is a possibility to connect there and to have knowledge sharing happening. And one of the key items there would be how do we transport hydrogen in the most efficient way, and not only as a fuel for ships, but also how can we make it a global commodity? Will it be as liquid hydrogen? Will it be as ammonia? Will it be as liquid organic hydrogen carriers? What would be the solution which gives the most bang for the buck, so to speak?
I would like to comment one thing about the viability of the hydrogen valleys. And that, like we've seen during recent decades, that when certain themes come up, it's pretty much regional or local activities. There were clean tech villages, and there have been bioeconomy villages, and so forth. And now it's about the hydrogen. It's a little bit the same. But I feel in order to create the value add and real competitiveness really for our countries as well, and really renew the industries, it's about the critical mass. And I would very much like to see that there are companies from different parts of the value chains who have research and development activities together in an ecosystemic way. And that would definitely also need that we have international collaborations. So then there are like foreign companies coming over and doing the investments in order to fulfill the proper potential gaps in the value chain, in order to have it more powerful vehicle. But if we use it wisely, it can be really powerful vehicle for creating new things. And one of the key components there is definitely that within that valley there is a trust building, and data is also shared in order to make new things to happen.
So good data sharing and making a critical mass. I was thinking about this COP is I mean, most COPs are the discussion is also about tipping points. I mean, we have negative tipping points with climate, but we also have positive tipping points when it comes to deployment of electric vehicles in the Nordics or renewables and so on. If you should mention, what is the tipping point for hydrogen? How do we make this actually be the future of tomorrow? Could you elaborate a little bit about that? Or have we actually reached some of the tipping points already? That could also be interesting.
Yeah, talking about the maritime sector, well, we definitely need regulation. We both need regional regulation, we need global regulation. And if we manage to achieve that, we believe that the tipping point, we'll see a tipping point in 10 years' time, in the middle of the 30s. Because at that time, the regulation would kick in and require shipping companies not only to use biofuels, but also to use e-fuels. So we believe there's a good chance to see a tipping point in 10 years' time if we manage to agree on not only European, but also global regulation.
What about you? Any of you, Niels or Helena?
Well, I could comment on this from the maritime sector, but I'm also thinking about the need for electricity we see now for data centers, which is booming. And this demand is to a great degree actually fulfilled by introducing gas turbines and open cycle gas turbines with, modest efficiency. And to be able to have this load following capacity, which gas turbines can provide, why don't we look into the transformation of those into hydrogen and possibly ammonia firing of these kind of gas turbines? I mean, gas turbines which are delivered in Europe have to be hydrogen compliant, but that also means that you would see then a huge demand for hydrogen being created towards taking all these load following demands, so the AI centers, which I think could have a great impact on the demand, because I mean, it was said by 𝗏𝗏𝗃, he said, implementation, and that's really what we're lacking in hydrogen these days, that implementation is lacking because of there's the price differences and nobody wants to pay the premium for the green solutions. At the integrated level, I would say we need to remove the premiums, so that you would naturally use the technologies which are green. And not that you had to pay extra to have those who are green, So I think creating a market for demand through what is now the big driver, which seems to be AI, And I think also we need to bear in mind that we're not going to use hydrogen for the sake of hydrogen. We're going to use it because it makes sense in some sectors.
I think that's quite important, that it has to make sense. So.
Yeah. Maybe some additional points. So this is probably the third starting for hydrogen economy, probably. And it was something like about 20 years ago, actually, we had a hydrogen distribution network in Finland. There were two stations there, but there were no off-takers, so it didn't fly very well, actually. So they were ahead of the market, so to say. So timing was not right. How I see this is that when we are talking about hydrogen economy, and when we are talking about linking it to carbon capture and all these new materials, chemicals, e-fuels we can produce, it comes back to the basic chemistry as well. Chemical industries, it's basic stuff then in the end, what can be used. So it's more about demand and the pricing, like was mentioned. So either there is some kind of support for to create this kind of non-fossil based raw material, some kind of a financial instruments there, or then the fossil fuels become so cost expensive that these are going to be also then doable. But carbon pricing is probably one of the key areas here. And anyway, we have to create somehow the financial scheme in order to make the hydrogen economy to grow. It has to be the demand, and we have to focus on the pricing issues, one way or another. I don't have the solution right now, but there are probably more intelligent people to think about that one.
Okay, more comments on this? I was thinking about, like, we see in all the scenarios that hydrogen is going to play a key role as energy carrier for heavy to weight industries and so on. But when will we see it commercialized? Do you have any idea when is the tipping point where hydrogen is so commercialized so it actually can be demanded more than commercial produced hydrogen? Is there any idea there?
Well, as I said earlier, we need the regulation to kick in. In the EU, you already have regulation. You have a fuel standard for shipping, Fuel EU Maritime. You have the emission trading scheme, which also stimulates the demand for alternative fuels. So here we see already a development, and the penalties for not complying with this regulation is actually quite high. So even though at the beginning you only reduce the emission targets very little, but the penalties for not living up to it is quite high. So we see there's a development already, and a lot of shipping companies have ordered dual fuel vessels. So when you look at the order book, more than 50% of all new builds are dual fuel. So I think little by little you see a difference, and we very much hope to see a commercial viable sector in, as I said, about 10 years' time.
Niels, you talked about implementation, and I think the COP is actually about implementation. So how close are we to seeing hydrogen fully integrated in the national commitment plans and NDCs? I mean, often you just talk about visions and so on, but when we will see it as a concrete policy and infrastructure plans in the NDC, do you think?
So it's really a hard one to answer, I think, when we'll see that. But I think it's really important that when it emerges in the NDCs, that it's not just hot air, you know. That's actually something which is going to be brought to fruition, that you actually get the projects running, you know. And the experience we see from hydrogen projects in Norway is really that in this initial phase you need to support all the steps, even the operation, to get it going, you know. And that's also about the acceptability of hydrogen as a fuel and safety issues, and that people feel that this is safe and can be done. So those projects are the projects which you see go through. But we must also reflect in the NDCs that the hydrogen use and hydrogen derivatives have changed over the years. I mean, if you read the IEA reports like 30 years ago, we would all be driving around with hydrogen cars these days, you know, which did not happen. I mean, with electric cars is the preferred in most countries. So the market for hydrogen has changed quite a lot, I would say. So it's really down to the hard-to-abate sectors. Deep sea shipping is one of them, maybe particularly for derivatives of hydrogen. But also see this for steel making, and there are huge projects also allegedly in problem in Sweden on this 𝗥𝗶𝗲𝗀𝗏 project, which is a huge one. But we see the industrial use and the hard-to-abate sectors are emerging, and that's where you would need to see it in the NDCs as well. I mean, when we're going to cut 75%, 55 by 2030, maybe 75 by 2035, and maybe 90%. I mean, you really need to look into the hard-to-abate sectors as well, and that's, I think, where hydrogen will play a significant role.
Elina?
Okay, if I continue, but I think you both said very much about this already. But it's a fact that many countries already have hydrogen strategies, but of course it's not the same that the NDCs. Then in the end, and hydrogen has been often mentioned as a lever or enabler of the transition, but no, not really like concrete plans and action plans how to implement them in the end. But all in all, I would say that. Potentially, we should focus much more to the end results and the impact, and because there's lots of diversification in the world, like we see that there are different kind of developments taking and focuses in different parts of the world, like we see in transportation sector, for instance, like Japan is going something to the fuel cells, and Europe is going to electrification, and here we have lots of biofuels. So in hydrogen, some are focusing more on any fuels, some are more industrial solutions, and some are more value-added products, for instance. So enabling and maybe in having the transparency, what kind of options there are, but really focusing on the impact, and then the countries and regions and industries find their own ways to reach the targets, but not so that the politicians decide on certain technologies.
Okay, thank you very much. You want to comment on it, or shall we open the floor?
No, one of the challenges for the shipping sector is that the fuel targets are not part of national plans for the NDCs. So we don't really see any national incentives for producing hydrogen for the shipping sector. It's left to the market, and the market is not there yet. So we need to do something to also prioritize the production of e-fuels for shipping.
Thank you. If there is anyone in the audience who wants to raise a question, yeah. Sorry. Please. Just mention your name and please.
Yes, 𝗤𝗂𝗶𝗶𝗀𝗏 from Aalto University. Thanks for a very interesting discussion. Kind of like a bit concerned on the idea of waiting the regulations to kick in, as we already see that the sort of like the other structures are eroding at the same time. There haven't been any significant wind farm investments in Finland for many years now, and there's lots of data centers coming up, sort of like taking the electricity that everybody assumed that would be used for hydrogen. So my question is that is there an opportunity for a shortcut for the positive tipping point, just by kind of like agreements, by if we get the 20 biggest shipping companies together and kind of like start to build the pipeline and kind of like shortcut the regulatory path?
You want to answer?
Thank you for this very relevant question. And I think there's a valid point that we can't wait for the regulation to kick in 10 years' time. We need to get started. And you rightly point out that there are opportunities for collaborating. You see 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏, which is the alliance for zero-emission off-takers in the shipping sector. They're collaborating between off-takers. That's a good idea, good initiative. We also work together in the zero-emission shipping mission. We share experiences, both in terms of fuels, in terms of vessel designs, and also on green corridors. So there's hope. But we need to strengthen these partnerships, and in particular in the Nordic region, we have very good options to working together. There are also initiatives under the Council of Ministers. You have the roadmap for alternative fuels in the Nordic region. So we need to get started.
I have also a question to you. Maybe you answered it a little bit then earlier on, but as you are so closely involved and having discussions with maritime industries, not only in Denmark but globally, so which are the fuels the maritime industry are betting on and which kind of a life, the duration, so which are now and which are then in the end, and what is prohibiting in this transition? It is really about the infrastructures, availability of fuels, prices and so forth. So if I would be, for instance, now a producer of some e-fuel, which fuel I should bet on and build my facilities, and how does the maritime industry see, or is it going to be like multi-fuel? And because also the harbors and ports, they have to live with that one and build their infrastructures accordingly. So just interested to know your views.
Oh, it's another good question. So I think we'll need a mix of different fuels. So there's no winner picking it all. So we need both. We need biofuels for the transition. We need LNG for the transition as well. But looking long term, we need in particular e-methanol and at later stage e-ammonia. So these are the most promising fuels. But we need all of them together. So they have different characteristics and there are different safety issues that we're also looking at from an authority perspective, and where we work together as maritime authorities to make sure that we have more or less the same rules and same approach to safety measures for bunkering in harbors, for safety measures for the crew, etc. So that's an area where we work together, and we need to be ready when we have the fuels demanding e-ammonia. We have e-methanol already. So we need all types of fuels. That's the short answer.
Yeah, looking into the crystal ball, what will be the future fuels is really hard to see. But I see now we have in Norway we have ferries. I mean, a lot of them are electrified. The short travels. Then there is a hydrogen ferry operating with liquid hydrogen. There is now a really long travel ferry which is being built in the northern part of Norway, which operate on compressed hydrogen. And now we have also supply ships which will operate with the 𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏 engines, with the ammonia, 1 out of 4 engines being ammonia. So we see this variety, as you are saying. But the one I'm, because I've worked a lot on CCS, and I raised the question like 10 years ago, why don't you do CCS on ships, Allegedly, I mean, they get heavier as they go, but it's also a technology which can be used for this really hard to abate, which is deep sea shipping. How do you look upon these options? Ammonia, because I am true believer in non-carbon fuels, and if you have carbon, maybe use CCS then on ships. How do you see these playing out?
Well, CCS is definitely part of the agenda, but we're also a bit concerned that we just prolong the problems by investing too much in CCS. Well, I don't know if we can say that we prefer e-ammonia, but we need to address the safety issues. So we currently have a debate ongoing in the IMO on how to look at CCS, but without investing too heavily in CCS, because we believe it will prolong the dependence of fossil fuels.
But are you then thinking about LNG with CCS or LNG without CCS?
Yeah, that could be an issue. Yeah, that could be possible to look into LNG with the CCS. Yes.
Interesting. Any more questions from the audience? You have one more. Please state your name and affiliation.
Yes, hello, my name is 𝗏𝗶𝗶𝗀𝗏 from Aalto University. Concerning the ammonia, could you comment on because ammonia is also fertilizer, and how do you this making food versus burning ammonia, so how do you see the role of that?
Well, we don't see a competition here. So you have produced ammonia for fertilizers for decades, but by using fossil fuels. Yeah, so it means that you have an experience and know how to carry ammonia. So that gives us an advantage that we actually know how to build the ships. We know how to carry ammonia, but we don't really see a competition here. You'll still need ammonia for agriculture, but that'll be produced in different ways. So yeah, for the time being, it hasn't, this type of competition hasn't really been an issue. So yeah.
One additional comment to that one, and yes, probably in the long run, it's not about the competition in that way, but the fact is really that the fertilizers prices are high, and also they have to buy at the moment from the countries that probably we don't want to do business. So definitely there's a need ammonia for that perspective. But of course, and on the other hand, we don't have that many ships either which are at the moment using ammonia. So it remains to be seen. But one comment about this discussion, and sorry about everybody is asking you the questions, but it just shows how important the maritime transportation sector is. And there's one colleague of mine who once said that if we wouldn't have a maritime transportation, 50% of people would starve to death in the globe and 50% would freeze to death. So it's highly important sector.
Just a comment about the competition issue. You know, I would say the same. You know, with the present deployment we see, I don't see the issue at all. But if you look to deep sea shipping, and if you were to replace that with ammonia, I think the production of ammonia had to increase by 4 to 6 times on a global scale. And then there is an issue, of course, of competitive, but this is a market mechanism, I guess. Another issue which often puzzles me a bit is this discussion about how dangerous ammonia is. Yes, it's toxic, you know, in certain concentrations, above a certain concentration, and it's hard to distinguish if it's low or high concentration. But we must bear in mind that this is the most traded chemical in the world, you know. So we're quite used to use or to handle ammonia, although not in an energy situation. I mean, first time I saw someone burning ammonia was actually in China, like 20 years ago. And I thought they're crazy, you know. What they're doing here, there was a integrated gasification plant where they had ammonia production and actually burned it without any kind of control. So the emissions were terrible, you know. But this is a new market, indeed, ammonia for energy.
Good. I would like to go back to the discussion we have early on in this session about this collaboration, also about getting critical mass and learning from each other in the different regions. So if we should sum up, what would you see is the most important thing in the Nordics to do to make sure that we learn from each other, that we stand as a region, because each countries are relatively small, but if we stand together, we actually do have the critical mass. We do lead the maritime sector when we put it all as a region. So how do we do it? Is there any last comments?
Oh, what an easy question. My brains are already melting here, but I would still go back to this more like a psychological point of view and saying it's about the ambition level as well. So I think that as Nordics we should also aim high and really think about more holistic way what new things we can add on, not just focusing on some however important subtopic here, but really build on our competencies, build on expertise, building new ones, and involving large scale of industries, or various industries there in the transition, and really make this kind of first-class hydrogen valleys in the Nordics.
So I think you took most of my items, actually. But I was thinking, you know, well, we've got the Nordic hydrogen valleys. This is a great starting point in my view, and that the Nordics could be a forward-looking region in not only Europe but at a global scale, in terms of cooperating and to get above the critical mass. because each country has its special features, demands the possibility to produce, and also we have the industrial base, you know. So I think it could be a great idea to put more effort into cooperating here and build upon the trust which we like to think we have among ourselves in the Nordic countries.
One area where we could work further together among the Nordic countries is on implementation. Because we have already agreed that we should be climate neutral by 2050 in the shipping sector. We've also agreed among the Nordic countries that we should have climate neutral ferries, but we haven't started implementation. So one step to start is look at the pre-feasibility studies that have already been made, and there are a series of corridors that could be financed and looked into. We just need to do the work and get going. We have many routes, 𝗏𝗏𝗀𝗏, 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 many routes that we could start with. So I think that we should start implementing and start working more together instead of only doing analysis and strategies.
So with this, I think we are almost to the end, and I thank you very much for the discussion, and nice that you actually ask each other questions. It always give a good discussion, and thank you for the audience. I hope you will continue discussing afterwards, and please, those of you who want to stand in a quarter of an hour, we will actually make a small mingle, so you're most welcome to stay. But let's end by giving a big applause to our panel.